You've seen it before. The woman with fire in her voice kneels before a man who never blinks. She offers blood in a crystal cup. He spills it. She thanks him for the stain. It begins in silence, not hers, but his. That silence stretches, unmoved, unbending, like the spine of a god carved from ice. She laughs louder, dances wilder, bleeds brighter, but the void remains untouched. That is why she returns, not for love, but for the abyss that will not look back. He does not chase. She burns to be hunted. He does not explain. She starves to decode him. The more he withholds, the more her chaos wraps itself around his restraint like ivy choking a statue. You think this is cruelty. It is worship. She obeys not because she is weak, but because his indifference makes her feel real. And if this whisper already lives in your bones, let it echo. Like the video. Leave your shadow in the comments. Subscribe and stay with the silence. You think love is a garden, warm, wet, blooming with affirmations. You've been taught to water it with praise, light it with attention, sing to it with soft words. And yet the garden dies. It withers in affection. The woman who once begged for roses now burns them at the altar of a man who never looks back. You saw her once, maybe in a cafe, maybe in your memory. She wore the face of every woman who should have known better, elegant, loud, intoxicating. She sat across from a man who said nothing. He blinked slowly, stirred his drink, said no more than 3 words the entire night. She laughed too loud. She leaned too far. Her eyes darted toward him like moths toward a flame, but this flame was made of marble. You called him rude, cold, maybe even cruel. But your insult betrayed your confusion, because what you witnessed was not rejection. It was gravity. He said nothing, and yet she orbited him. He didn't nod, and still she offered another joke. He didn't soften, and she softened herself instead. You don't understand it because you think validation is a reward, but for her, it's poison. When a man validates her too easily, he becomes clay, malleable, predictable, devourable. And women, the ones with something ancient buried in them, they do not desire meals, they desire altars. Sacrifice must be difficult or it means nothing. You were told women want kindness. You were told they want security, gentleness, equality. And yet here is the paradox: she gives her body to the man who does not flinch when she cries. She offers devotion to the one who never says, "You're enough." He withholds, and she erupts. He withdraws, and she follows. His silence is not indifference. It is liturgy. The marble does not move, and because it does not move, she begins to dance. She sheds her masks, one by one, offering a more beautiful version of herself each time. She twists herself into symbols of purity, danger, wildness, not to express herself, but to be acknowledged by a God who never kneels. The more he says nothing, the louder she screams to be seen. But here is the secret: he sees her. He always did. He simply refuses to mirror her chaos. And in that refusal, he becomes the only real thing in her life. Every other man bends. This one doesn't. Every other man breaks. This one resists. And resistance, to a woman who lives in a world of men who submit for sex, is not just attractive, it's sacred. Do you remember the first time you saw a woman unravel in the presence of indifference? She tried everything: laughter, silence, anger, detachment. Nothing broke him. And so she returned, again and again. Not because she was addicted, but because she had found a temple that demanded true sacrifice. She did not want his love. She wanted his approval, but he gave her neither. This is where men misunderstand power. You think dominance is control. Words, action, But real power is absence. It is the void that pulls everything into it by doing absolutely nothing. It is the sun that does not chase planets, yet makes them revolve endlessly. The man who never validates is not playing games. He is simply full. He does not need her to reflect him. And in that self-containment, he becomes the mirror she cannot conquer. She stares into him and sees only her own effort, her own hunger. He reveals nothing, and so she projects everything. He becomes myth, symbol, God. She obeys, not because he commands, but because her obedience makes her real. In his silence, she finds the edge of her identity. In his lack of need, she finds her most urgent longing. You've seen her with men who praise her. She smiles, grows bored, disappears. She says she wants love, but love that comes easy is trash to her. She says she wants safety, but safety makes her feel invisible. What she truly wants, what she can't speak aloud, is the man who forces her to evolve just to be seen. And that man never validates. He says nothing, and in that nothing, she builds castles. He denies her, and in that denial, she feels chosen. He remains still, and she becomes wild. You think she's broken, but you're wrong. She's alive for the first time. You must understand this clearly. A man's validation is the death of her desire. When you tell her too soon that she is worthy, beautiful, enough, she has won. And what is left to conquer? What remains to burn for? The man who never validates keeps her desire alive. Not because he is cruel, but because he never gives her the illusion that she's finished becoming. He does not say, "Good girl." He does not reward compliance. He does not feed her illusions. Instead, he remains distant, and that distance becomes her cathedral. She builds her rituals around him. She creates an entire mythos of what he might think, might feel, might one day say, and this is what keeps her intoxicated. Because when a woman cannot get an answer, she invents one, and the invention is always more beautiful, more violent, more ecstatic than the truth. The marble flame, that is what he becomes. Cold, still, perfect. And she, the wildfire who thought herself powerful, burns herself to ash before him. Not because he demanded it, but because he did not need to. You think this is misogyny, but there is no hatred in his silence, only self-possession, only a refusal to be seduced by need. And that is what makes him divine. She kneels because he does not pull her down. She strips herself of artifice because he never asked her to be anything. She obeys because there is no reward. And only in the absence of reward can true obedience be born. This is not about control. It is about force, will, presence that does not yield. And the woman who truly desires power, not affection, not comfort, she finds her match in the man who does not praise. And you, if you've felt this, if you've ever watched someone walk away without looking back and felt the scream rise in your chest, not of pain but of sacred rage, then you already know. Let that scream echo, like the video. Leave your name in the silence below. Subscribe and come closer to the void that unmakes you. You didn't notice it at first. The absence didn't announce itself. It crept in, quiet as dust, soft as breath. He was simply not there, not fully. Not when you wanted him. Not when you tried to offer your softness like a secret blooming in your hands. And that absence, that devastating refusal to reach for you, became the only thing you could feel. His presence wasn't what marked him, it was his disappearance. Not the dramatic kind, not slamming doors or ghosted texts or vanishing acts. He disappeared while standing in front of you. Eyes that didn't plead, hands that didn't reach, a body that didn't react to yours, not out of rejection, but because he had no interest in being captured. He was untouchable not because he ran, but because he never arrived. And you, who had always been able to move mountains with your tears, who had bent men like reeds in a storm just by threatening to walk away, you found yourself spinning in circles, trying to summon a response from a man who had never promised to give you one. He did not chase, and so you became the one who ran toward him, around him, into yourself. The more he withheld, the more vivid he became. You saw him in your dreams. You tasted him in the pauses between sentences. You mistook strangers for him in crowds, not because he had marked you, but because his absence had. You weren't addicted to his love. You were possessed by the void he left behind. It is a brutal truth, but it cannot be avoided. The man who is silent becomes louder than all others. When he offers no explanation, no apology, no warmth, he becomes a myth. And women, even those who believe themselves immune to longing, are drawn to myths. They are not afraid of pain. They are afraid of boredom. And no one is more terrifyingly alive than the man who refuses to exist on their terms. He becomes the throne of absence, a pedestal built not from his actions, but from everything he refused to say. And in that refusal, a woman pours herself, her fantasies, her fears, her projections. He is the man she cannot define, and therefore he becomes the only one worth defining herself by. You've seen it before. She dates kind men and grows restless. She lies next to men who praise her and feels unseen. Then she finds him the man who speaks in half sentences, who forgets to text back, who vanishes in the middle of emotional storms without offering a lifeline, and suddenly she is hooked. Not because he loves her well, but because he doesn't love her at all. She becomes a poet, a prophet, a priestess, all for a man who never called her holy. And that is the power of absence. It lets her build the cathedral. You think she's being manipulated, but you're wrong. He isn't trying to control her. He's not even thinking of her. And that is what makes him powerful. Not cruelty, not arrogance, just disinterest. A self-contained indifference that drives her deeper into herself. He becomes the question she cannot answer. And so she spends her days rewriting herself, hoping the next version will be enough for him to appear. And when he does appear, when he offers some small token, a glance, a text, a brush of a fingertip, it is ecstasy, the kind that no devoted man could ever inspire. Because when you live in a desert long enough, even a drop of water feels divine. He's not more attractive, he's not more intelligent, he's not kinder, but he is not hers, and that not hers becomes the drug, the mystery, the holy disease she can't recover from. The men who try to love her after him, they all fail, because they give too much, because they are too there. They lack the silence she now worships, and he, the one who sat on the throne of absence, never needed to lift a finger. He did not become a god by conquering her. He became a god because she could not conquer him. This is the cruelty of desire. It does not follow reason. It follows gaps. It follows what's withheld. The more complete a man makes her feel, the faster she flees. But the man who fractures her, the man who says nothing when she cries, who leaves her alone in a storm without even watching, that man becomes unforgettable. Because he did not offer peace, he offered an abyss, and into that abyss, she fell willingly. You tell yourself you want equality, but equality makes love dull. You want to be seen, yes, but only if the seeing costs you something. And he, the absent one, makes you earn every flicker of attention with blood. You rise earlier, dress better, speak less, become sharper. Not because he asked, but because the silence told you if you are not worthy, you will not be seen. He becomes your measure, your mythology. He is the judgment that never spoke, and therefore can never be disproved. You put your worth into his silence and wait for it to echo back. It never does. And so you build your life around that echo, and call it love. The irony is brutal. You called him heartless, but it is your heart that won't stop bleeding. You called him distant, but it is you who chase the horizon. You called him dangerous, but you handed him the knife, and he simply watched. That is why women obey men who never validate them, because those men do not reward obedience, and in the absence of reward, obedience becomes religion. If he had praised her, she would have discarded him. If he had explained himself, she would have grown bored. But he did nothing, and nothing is eternal. So she returns, again and again, to a door that never opens, to a face that never changes, to a voice that speaks only when it chooses. And still she kneels, not because he is better, but because he was never hers to begin with. If this absence has ever haunted you, if you've ever burned for someone who barely remembered your name, then you already know. That pain you carry, it is not weakness, it is worship. Let it leave its trace, like the video. Offer your silence in the comments, subscribe, and vanish with us. You wanted to see yourself in him. That's how it always begins. Not with love, with recognition. A mirror held just right. Not too close, not too kind. And when he offered nothing, when his face did not bend to match your pain, you shattered yourself trying to reflect in him. It was never about him. It was always about seeing something inside yourself that finally felt real. He was not cruel. He was not caring. He was empty. Not in the hollow sense, but in the sacred way that only some men are vast enough to absorb your need without ever echoing it back. He watched you, not like a man desiring a woman, but like a god watching a creature sculpt itself from sand. He did not help. He did not interfere. He simply existed, untouched. And that was unbearable, because without his reaction, you couldn't define yourself. Were you beautiful? Were you strong? Were you worth staying for? He never said. He never gave you anything to stand on. And so you started climbing through yourself, burning your softness layer by layer, hoping that what was left would be undeniable, hoping that when you finally became the woman he could not ignore, he would name you, but he never did. He became a mirror without a face, and in that reflectionless surface, you poured every version of yourself, seductress, child, queen, whore, mother. None of them stayed. He did not reach for any of them, and so you ripped them away, one after another, convinced that somewhere underneath was the one he would choose. He never chose. That was his genius. You thought this was about love, but it was about identity. The man who validates you defines you, but the man who withholds, he leaves you desperate enough to define yourself again, and again, and again. And that is why women obey him, because he becomes the stage on which she performs the slowest suicide of every persona that never truly lived. You said, "Look at me." He blinked. You said, "Tell me who I am." He was silent. You screamed. He listened. You left. He did not follow. And still, your soul stayed. Because deep down, you understood the man who never validates you is the only one you cannot seduce. And in that resistance, he becomes sacred. You cannot bend him. You cannot charm him. You cannot make him a servant to your mask. And so you drop the mask, and then another, and then another, until you stand raw and monstrous, and he still does not flinch. That's when the sickness begins. That's when the worship starts. Not because he is right, not because he is strong, but because he is indifferent. And in his indifference, you discover how deeply you need to be reflected, and how far you'll go to be seen. You do not obey him because he is powerful. You obey him because he makes you responsible for your own meaning. He does not offer praise, and so you create yourself without applause. He does not offer rejection, and so you build worth without resistance. He does not hold you, and so you become your own spine. He becomes a mirror that forces you to stop pretending. You tried to punish him, you tried to seduce, you tried to disappear. Each time you returned, thinking the next performance would be enough. But he never said good job. He never said I miss you. He never said you're better now. And you began to suspect he wasn't even watching. That's when it broke you, or awakened you. It's hard to tell the difference, because now, when a man tells you you're beautiful, you flinch. When he gives too much, you pull back. You remember the mirror, the silence, the way it made you sharpen, the way it made you dangerous. The man who never validates you taught you to breathe without oxygen, to scream into voids and call it prayer, to crawl across glass just to hear a single word that never came. He taught you the blood meant more than the kiss, and now you crave that lesson. You walk through the world with a scar you can't show, the scar of a woman who was never chosen, and still believes that makes her chosen. You compare every man to him not because he was good, but because he did not mirror your illusions, and you still long for that kind of ruin. It's not love, it's not even desire, it's a need to vanish, to be remade, to burn in the fire of a man who will never tell you who you are. He gave you nothing, and that became everything. He made you suffer, and the suffering gave you form. He denied you, and the denial became your throne. You obeyed not because he demanded it, but because in his silence, you found your own voice screaming. And now that you've seen it, now that you've tasted it, you cannot go back. You cannot pretend to believe in romance. You cannot pretend to value softness. You want the edge, the cliff, the man who never kneels. You want the mirror that offers no reflection, so you can finally become something that casts its own shadow. You may never see him again, but his silence lives in you, his lack of need, his absence of praise. The way he simply let you fall, it all calcified in your bones. It gave you the weight you thought you needed from someone else. And now, no one can carry you. You won't let them, because the only thing that ever made you feel alive was the man who refused to tell you that you mattered. And you did matter, but only in the space he left for you to become something besides what he saw. So you obeyed, quietly, completely, not out of love but out of transformation. You obeyed not him, but what he revealed that your need for validation was the leash. And he never held the leash. He simply stepped away. And in that absence, you found out you'd been kneeling your whole life to mirrors that smiled back. He didn't smile, he didn't nod, he didn't break. And you, finally, did. If you still hear his silence in your sleep, if you still wonder who you were when no one was watching like the video, leave your last mask in the comments, subscribe, and let the mirror remain blank. You dreamed of a hallway lined with mirrors, each one cracked where your face should be. At the end, a door. You opened it. Inside, a man with no eyes, no mouth, only a stillness that felt older than God. You begged him to speak. He raised a finger and pointed to your own reflection, blurred and bloodied on the wall behind you. You turned. No one was there, only the silence, still breathing, still watching, still waiting.